Good evening. My name is Markela Petrides, and I'm the Assistant Director at the Maliotis Cultural Center. And on behalf of Presbytera Chrysula Kurkundi, the Executive Director, and our whole team here at Maliotis Cultural Center, we'd like to welcome you to Greek Women from Antiquity to Now, a mini conference brought to you by the Maliotis Cultural Center of Hellenic College and Holy Cross. The Maliotis Cultural Center's mission is to promote Hellenic culture and language. We pursue our mission through diverse programming, including lectures, seminars, and conferences, Greek concerts and dance performances, student engagement, traveling and permanent exhibits, and Hellenic American community events, and through the support of patrons and viewers like you. If you enjoy this event, please consider supporting the center and attending our other upcoming events, including the Greek Orthodox Archdiocese of America's 100-year conference happening next week from Thursday to Friday, October 6th to 7th, a night of poetry with Dimitrios Demosthenes Despotidis on October 20th, and an event that's happening in cooperation with the Ionarios Library on October 25th. You can learn more about these and other offerings on our website, maliotis.hchc.edu, our Instagram, Facebook, or by signing up for our newsletter. Tonight's mini-conference, Greek Women from Antiquity to Now, is brought to you by the Maliotis Cultural Center and is a one-day conference featuring 4 speakers who will present on Hellenic women, mythological figures, historical figures, and their influence. We will hear from Dr. Stamatia Dova on female agents of Nostos in the Odyssey. Dr. Kiki Karoglu will present on dangerous beauty, gorgons, sirens, and sphinxes in classical art. Eleftheria Gufa will offer remarks on female nature, and we will close with the continuation of our Meet the Artists series with the presentation by Hellenic Heads exhibition artist George Petrides. To start us off, I'd like to welcome to the stage Mr. George Kantonis, the president of Hellenic College Holy Cross.
Thank you, Markella. On behalf of Hellenic College and Holy Cross, I welcome all, both in person and live streaming, to this exciting event. It is not often that one can attend an exhibit of outstanding art and be able to hear the reflections and the thoughts of highly educated commentators, but also be able to listen and to meet the artist himself. We're honored to be able to present and exhibit your work, Mr. Petrides, and even more so, really, that you've joined us this evening. Our Professor Matadova, Dr. Kiki Karoglu, formerly of the Met in New York, and Eleftheria Gufa, amongst other responsibilities, a conservator of the Benaki and cultural manager. We look forward to hearing from you all. We thank you all specifically for making this such a special event. But I must take the opportunity to specifically thank Executive Director of the Maliotis Cultural Center, Presbytera Chrysula Kurkundi, for all of her efforts in arranging this exhibit, not only working with the artist, but actually driving to the Hamptons with Markella to personally load the sculptures in a van and transport them to us here in Brookline. That's the kind of dedication that we have amongst our team here at the Maliotis Center. Thank you all again for attending. Please enjoy what I believe will be a truly enriching evening.
We're going to hear from George Petrides, the artist and sculptor of the Hellenic Heads exhibit located here at Maliotis Cultural Center now through the end of November. A little bit about George. George Petrides, the international sculptor who lives and works in New York City and Athens, Greece, creates abstract figurative sculptures in sizes ranging from a few inches to more than life size, combining the timeless with the contemporary. Born in Athens in 1964 and raised there in New York, he is steeped in ancient Greek sculpture and the works that were influenced by it: Donatello, Michelangelo, Auguste Rodin, Aristide, etc., as well as the 20th century modernists who reinterpreted these traditions. He closely follows contemporary figurative sculptors, especially those who reference ancient Greek art, such as Charles Ray and Humbaba Baba, as well as the many other artists who are part of a resurgence in figurative sculpture. With the Hellenic Heads exhibit, Petrides presents a personal exploration into his Greek background, seeking to understand the cultural influences that have shaped him and the people closest to him. Starting with a rigorous research process including archaeological artifacts, academic sources, family stories, and historical photographs, Petrides studied 6 important periods from 2,500 years ago to the present. Hellenic Heads, our current exhibit, is an artistic dialogue between the past and present, elucidating the universal character of Greek culture and its fundamental role in shaping Greek identity. This traveling exhibition highlights the necessity of art and the importance of the creator in modern society, and conveys intercultural dialogue through cultural diplomacy. Cultural diplomacy is key to the mutual understanding of other nations and their cultural heritage, as it examines human development through artistic creation. Welcome, George. Great to have you tonight as part of our Meet the Artist series continuation.
I'm going to use this so I can kind of see what's going on here. If we could get started with the Washington installation. This was the embassy, is the embassy in D.C., and let's just go through the installation shots and I'll try to describe what we were looking at. So Markella did an excellent job describing generally what was going on, or what I try to do. So there were 6 heads, and the 6 heads each represented a different historical period. Now, why did I embark on this adventure? I was interested in what are the trends that, or what are the themes or the influences that someone who's Greek or Greek American has, and how do you become, Greek American? And I decided to look at 6 different periods, and I'll just show them to you here. In each case, Markella said, I looked at research, so kind of reading about the period, talking to people, going to museums, and then I found a family member that I thought would be good to pose for me. So as you'll see, we go through it, my mother, my father, etc. And I also looked at art history. So I was interested in kind of how sculptors before me had dealt with similar issues. So that's kind of the general format. And I'll talk to you about the 6 very briefly, and then I'll talk to you about the 4 females. We're going to leave aside the 2 men. And then one of the 4 females got made into a statue. So just 10 days ago in Athens, we had the unveiling of one of these big pieces, and I'll show you that. So going here, what we have is the 1, 2, 3. Well, is one missing? I count 5. What's missing? Oh, Thalia is missing. Okay. So we'll look at these 5 very briefly. The male on the left we'll leave out, but the large green figure is called Heroines of 1821, and all of these are sitting, up the staircase. But Heroines of 1821 was a comment, and Eleftheria touched on this, was a comment or an exploration of the female military leaders of the Greek War of Independence, and we'll look at that more in a second. The brown figure is about the Nazi occupation and the Greek Civil War. We'll do that next year when we talk about, the males. The one way in the back there, Emmanuel, could we just go to the next slide? Maybe it's clear. Maybe the next slide. Yes, this one here. The one on the right is called The Refugee, and so this is about Smyrna. So we had 100 years ago the destruction of Smyrna, and many people were displaced, including my own grandmother, and many people sadly didn't make it out. But this piece is about that era. The blue figure is the very first chronologically, so it's Thalia, and she's about the classical Greek civilization. And so I think if you look at the 3 females that we've talked about so far, I think you're starting to get the idea that I'm trying to weave together through these large overhead sculptures. I'm trying to weave together these influences, this kind of source material that makes you Greek or makes you Greek American. So, for example, Thalia, the blue figure, you may not have studied classics, but somehow, when you're growing up, you hear about Aristotle and Socrates, and you hear about Medusa. So somewhere in your Greek psyche, there is this classical thing. The this one here, the refugee, many Greeks have some relationship with Smyrna or Podos or some kind of refugee experience. Maybe it's coming to the United States. So I think that comes somewhere in the experience. Let's look at one more slide here, and then this one here. This is a curious one. This blue one. I wanted, as I looked through these periods over 2,500 years, I wanted to conclude by looking at the present, and the present was actually the hardest one to do. I was, describing Greece today or describing the United States today is difficult. There's a lot of conflict and good things and not so good things happening. So this one here, and we'll look at it a little bit in detail in a second, is about the present looking towards the future. So that was in DC. We had Europe Day. 2,100 people came and saw this exhibit in a single day. Very compact, actually, only about 6 or 7 hours. So let's Emmanuel, let's go forward. This is all 6 of them shown together, and you can see the 4 females, and we'll look at each one relatively quickly. So let's keep going. Some more. Something's coming up. I want to show you this, and these are actually the placards. If you happen to go upstairs, you'll see them. These are the stickers that are on each of the stands or the pedestal bases. And so what I want you to see, you kind of can barely see it from here, I think, but this is the outline with which I worked for every one of the 6 statues. So in each case, I had a period, and as I discussed, there were 6 over that period of time. I give some technical descriptions of how the thing was made and what the dimensions are. In each case, as I mentioned, I chose a family member. So someone who was alive or not alive from photographs posed for me, and they became the vehicle, kind of the emotional drive in terms of putting this sculpture together and giving it life. So this was my mother, or is my mother, still alive, but the photos are of her black and white photos around 1950 in Greece, and very thin. And back then people were not very thin for style reasons. They were very, coming out of the Second World War and the Civil War. They were just famished. So the themes we'll look at when we look at the piece, and the sculptural precedent we're not going to look at today. But in each of these, I went back and I looked at another sculptor. So in some cases it's Michelangelo, in some cases it's Rodin. So I was always interested in how did other people think about, or how did other sculptors deal with this same question, the same feeling or the same phenomenon of being a refugee, and what could that help me as I resolve my statue. So let's Manuel, let's look at some photos of this. Coming soon. So this one is upstairs. All 6 of them are upstairs. And this is, as I was saying, the classical Greek period. Emmanuel, I think we can just kind of flick through these a little bit. If you have a chance, go up and look at it. Here you're getting a sense of the scale. So these are about 36 inches or so. As I was saying, a classical Greek period, some resemblance to my mother. The colors are this bluish, brass kind of patinated that you see. Let's keep going, and probably we'll move forward to the next one. The profile here, kind of distinctive. Let's move for the next one. The next one I think is the heroines of 1821. So last year I was asked to do something for the Greek Revolution, and as you know, that was 200 years from, last year was 200 years from the inception of the revolution, which was 1821 to 2021. And so here I didn't want to do something about the warlords, Karaiskakis, and all these people that you see, the typical, the big mustaches and the big craggy nose. I wanted to look at, and this goes to Eleftheria's speech that she wrote for you or read to you. I wanted to look at the female leaders within the Greek Revolution. So there were three specific ones that are named here. I think they're named here. No, they're not named here. Bubulina is Laskarina Bubulina, Domina Vizi, and Madame Avrogenis are the ones that stand out the most. And they were all naval commanders, and in all cases, they gave their fortune and their lives, in some cases, or ultimately they did, for the struggle, the Greek War of Independence. So when we look at, let's go and look at the piece. Again, you can see this upstairs, but for the moment, I'll show it to you here. This is the piece. So here I was referring to some French sculpture that came out, I don't know, in the mid-1850s or so by Cordier is the name of the sculptor. But I was interested in showing a modern woman. The traditional dress gives a sense that she's a Greek, Evzonos, or a military outfit of that period of time. But the hair might be of a modern woman. And then the gaze is meant to show, can we see some more of these? The gaze is meant to show some defiance and some vision and looking forward. And you have that, traditional little Amalia cap on top that many of you know. And then this just shows the scale, which is relatively large, about 36 inches or so. So I like the way the hair came down, and it's kind of dynamic, and I think the whole thing turned out good. Let's keep going. Here's the face. The next one, I believe, is the refugee. So we'll look at that, and then we'll look at the large statue that was just unveiled 10 days ago in Athens. So here, the refugee, there were multiple instances. There was the actual destruction of Smyrna in 1922, which was just really concluded September 19th. And then there was the population exchange that occurred, a few months after that, starting in January of 23. And millions of people were affected. In my case, I imagined, as you'll see, my grandmother, or as I mentioned, my grandmother when she was a young woman arriving in Athens. And so let's actually, Emmanuel, let's go ahead and look at the piece. Here, I was, working with photographs, someone who was no longer alive, or actually, excuse me, not even photographs, because my grandmother at 19 was someone I never met, nor were there photographs existing of her. So I was interested in capturing the shock. So my grandmother was from a relatively well-off family in Smyrna, and as you might know about Smyrna, it was a cosmopolitan city, and you had a documentary here last night. So it was a cosmopolitan, relative to Greece, certainly, a relatively wealthy port, with all the sophistication there. And my grandmother was part of that, and that my grandfather was a captain, a sea captain, and they lost it all. And she ended up in Greece, with the clothes on her back in 1922. So I was here. Can we forward? More forward. Yeah, here I was trying to capture the shock and also the grief of having this experience, but also showing perhaps a little bit some dignity and accepting this and in starting to create a new life. Some more. You can see the scale here. Close up. And let's switch to the public statue. So this is kind of a treat for me, and I hope for you, because this is the first time I've shown these photos. So September 14th, just 10 days ago or less, was the unveiling of this public statue of mine. Here it is. So it's based on the one that you saw and the one that you see upstairs, but it's much larger. It's about sitting on its base. It's about 9 feet tall. And could we just flick through these relatively fast, just get a sense of almost like a movie, like you're walking around it. And this is a Neopsychikos. So this is an area of Athens where many refugees settled around 1929 to 1930 from a part of Athens called Vourla. So stop there for a second. So that church there, maybe could you go forward so we'll see the church some more? That's a very nice, here it is. So this church is the third incarnation of this church that was built in this area. These refugees arrived in 1929, and the first church was like a little hut, and over time they, accumulated some resources. So this church harks back to a church in Vurla from about 1556. So these people came to this area. They rebuilt their lives over the course of time. This was made into a little monument or a little memorial here. So you can barely see it, but the names of the cities, these cities in Asia Minor, are actually kind of carved in the marble, or the granite rather. And I was allocated this little spot here that you see over there where the flowers, where you see where the base and the statue are. And I'm very pleased. I think the whole thing just kind of came together like it was always meant to be one design. That church, that what do you call it? That water memorial, and then my own piece. Manuel, let's keep cracking. Yeah, here's another view of it. So some of the challenges were, how do you make something much larger? How do you do it in Greece? Because I had to work with local artisans, and everything happened at the last minute, as I'm sure you would believe me on that with Greece. And then, designing the base and getting something that was appropriate. And then in terms of the dimensions, could you go forward? You'll see kind of me standing next to it. Keep going. Yeah, so one of the things, so when I was looking at the dimensions, I wanted to do it so that it was kind of the way I remembered my grandmother, as a child, and I'd be looking up at her. So I had this angle that I wanted to capture, and then I wanted the piece itself to be large so that it had some monumentality. So you felt, okay, this was an important person or an important phenomenon to, honor. But then at the same time, I wanted the base low enough so that you could relate to it, so people could actually walk up to it and touch it if they felt they wanted to do that. Let's keep going. We just go through these. I think you got the idea. So here you kind of see the relative scale. I think we could move to the last one, and then so the last one was the most interesting, or the most difficult one, and I think it's, in some ways, it's the piece that I would want to rework, but you'll see it and I'll talk to you about it. It's the present. So as I'd looked at all these historical period, and we left out the two male versions, or the two male figures. But for the present, initially I had my daughter pose. So my daughter's 12, and, obviously a very sweet, girlish phase, as I write here, optimism and innocence. And so I started, and it started looking like her. But as I kept going, because I was thinking about, what's going on in Greece politically, economically, and socially, it changed. And let's keep looking at it. So it's a piece that in some ways is, I don't think it's disturbing, although someone did say it was disturbing, but let's take a look at it. I wanted to capture a sense of optimism that something good can still happen in Greece. But I also wanted to capture some, I don't want to say maybe turmoil, maybe it's in the hair, maybe it's in the roughness of the surface, but I wanted to give it can we keep going? I wanted to give it a color that was unusual, so it went kind of into this dark blue with this lying over this brass. So perhaps it's the most experimental of the pieces, but I do hope you get a chance to see it upstairs. Any more images on this? Side image here, front image here.